It's the ferryman.
Oh!
Maybe it's real.
Scooby-Doo! Where are you? Oh, there you are. Do I really need to introduce to you guys what Scooby-Doo is? The gang of beatniks have been travelling in their mystery machine, catching bad guys in masks for over 54 years now, never being out of production long in that time. This silly little series, acting as a very light-hearted gateway into the worlds of gothic and detective fiction for generations of people. As a franchise, it's experienced the highest of the highs, and the lowest of the lows.
Couldn't have a show without ya.
There's also this website I found while researching. It's an entire Wikipedia dedicated to that one potion scene from Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. I just wanted to mention that this exists. But let me tell you, the heights don't get much higher than the original love letters to the classic series, an underrated part of the franchise history that we'll be looking at today to see if they still hold up. And they are the original direct-to-VHS trilogy of films: Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost, and Alien Invasion.
And also Scooby-Doo and Cyber Chase.
At the time of the first film, the Scooby-Doo franchise was about 30 years in and was definitely in a lull production-wise. The last truly successful project they had made is the fondly remembered A Pup Called Scooby-Doo, a fun reworking of the show for younger audiences. That show had ended back in 1991, leaving an unprecedented 7 years without a proper revival. Despite this, and much to Warner Brothers' surprise, the series wasn't experiencing much of a degradation in popularity. Its differing versions were on all the time on channels like Cartoon Network, thanks to a solid viewership. And the 80s films were a staple of Halloween broadcasting. I remember watching Reluctant Werewolf and Ghoul School every year. Don't Google that last film. The internet also remembers it. Taking notice and performing a Q-score test, a film was commissioned to both capitalise on the continued love of the series, while also having a little taste of what returning to the IP would be like financially. But rather than going with another TV movie, it was the success of Batman Mask of the Phantasm, surprisingly, that made them up the budget and go with a direct-to-VHS release. The success of those home video Batman films are, like Scooby-Doo's, still alive today in yearly installments. They're rarely good, but it's still neat they exist.
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.
The writing team was made up of Scooby-Doo alums, with the main trio of Stenstrom, Doy, and Leopold being the masterminds behind the trilogy. The direction the team wanted to go with was a darker, though not excessively so, take on the original series. The idea being that time has passed for these characters the same as it has for us watchers, and we were reuniting for a more mature, but still quintessentially Scooby-Doo story. For animation duties, the job was handed over to Mook, a Japanese studio that at the time carved out a niche making surprisingly well animated Western shows like Spawn, Men in Black, and X-Men Evolution.
We got a #1 victory royale, yeah, Fortnite, we bout to get down. 10 kills on the board right now, just wiped out Tomato.
Hey yo, look at them go! With all the pieces in place, and indifferent producers letting them do just whatever, the franchise was ready to rise from the dead with its first entry, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
So come along with Scooby and all the gang in their most frightening mystery ever, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Because this time, the monsters are real.
So one of my favourite parts of this film is that we begin by picking up with the gang a few years separated from the original series.
Yeah, I really miss them.
Yeah, like we really miss you too, Daphne.
They've naturally gone their independent ways, with Velma running a small bookshop, Shaggy and Scooby slumming it as airport security, this bit is cute, and Daphne working as a small-time reporter with Fred as a cameraman. There's something really nice about how they're all on good terms, and the writers didn't go too crazy with their futures. Velma's not inventing spaceships, and Shaggy isn't a world-class chef. They're all leading normal lives. Speaking of which, Fred decides to surprise a burnt-out Daphne with a reunion, deciding to do a nostalgic road trip together to reconnect and film for a new show.
So, what's coming up for the new season?
A new series of segments called Haunted America.
Sort of a ghost to ghost with Daphne Blake.
Boo! You stink!
If this setup sounds familiar, well, it's because writer James Gunn lifted it for the 2002 live-action film, only much more cynically. In fact, it's Zombie Island's positive character dynamics that really sell this film. They do such a good job at communicating to us the history these guys have together, which is particularly impressive considering only Fred's voice actor Frank Welker returns from the original shows. Real talk, until Velma, this man had always played Fred, voicing him since the original 1969 series.
This place is locked up tighter than a drum.
I bet whoever that is the one who's really behind this.
That's crazy, I love it. BJ Ward is also here as Velma, reprising the role after first appearing in the best crossover ever made.
My glasses! I can't see without my glasses!
My glasses! I can't be seen without my glasses!
Alright, Scooby Natural comes close. We are still largely attempting to do something fresh with the IP here, but we first get a nice throwback montage of the gang dealing with familiar situations, establishing the status quo, paying homage to it, before they break it later. It has a sincere love of its past, even when subverting it, opposed to simply pointing out a trope and saying it's stupid. Speaking of which, if there's a main character in this film, it's surprisingly Daphne. For initially being the most undeveloped character in the gang, events in this narrative revolve around her feelings of monotony.
Bad guys in masks, mechanical claws, magnets, hologram projectors. Just like the good old days. Too much like the good old days.
Despite being the biggest success of the team, she's also the most dissatisfied with how her life's turned out. The stories she covers are repetitive and boring, and though never really resolved in this film or, ever, she's outwardly irritated towards Fred's stagnant approach to starting a relationship. So while this montage is fun nostalgia bait for us viewers, for Daphne it's just not what she's looking for. Still, not wanting to give up, the gang decide to follow a tip from a woman claiming that her island is haunted by the ghost of an old pirate guarding his lost treasure. And already this is sounding like a broken record. By this point, the gang has caught up with us viewers. Dramatic irony has just become ironic. They're self-aware of the Scooby-Doo formula. Things might not be as they seem, however. Although the gang can't, we are able to feel a difference in this case once they arrive. For starters, the plantation they visit is not cartoonily gothic. It's not a big Dracula-esque castle or an abandoned theme park run by one of their many uncles. It's quiet, and it's eerie. The fact it's a plantation alone carries significant unpleasant weight that's not normally present in the locales they investigate. And on top of that, the surroundings and music convey an environment that's distant and unwelcoming. If there's something all three films excel at, it's the atmosphere. They lean harder into the series being a horror-themed show, and while that doesn't mean there's gore and jump scares, more time is invested in building a spooky atmosphere. They also modernised some other aspects of the series, such as Daphne's ghost hunting show as both narrative drive and character motivation. They're not just doing this because, you know what, they never gave a reason in the original. How were they making money? This TV show conceit also adds this analogue motif of seeing the supernatural occurrences through the lens of VHS footage, a whole year before Blair Witch did it. Was that a stretch? I just wanted an excuse to show the Blair Witch parody they did later on.
My feet hurt.
Well, is it our fault you wore high heels on a hiking trip?
At least I try to look feminine.
I particularly love that they update old running gags and add nods to the original opening. They even homage the semi-frequent musical numbers of the original series, obviously swapping the late 60s pop music with more contemporary tracks from bands like Third Eye Blind and Sky Cycle. I'm being facetious. Terror Time is an unquestionable bop.
You hear the screeching of an owl, you hear the wind begin to howl. You know there's zombies on the prowl, and it's terror time again. They've got you running through
not all perfect though. This was the first time they decided to nix Fred's ascot for being too dated, an error that lasted just way too long. Put that back on right now! Jokes aside though, there are one too many Shaggy and Scooby eating scenes for the length of the film. And while the gothic horror elements are definitely being exemplified, the detective work is taking a big backseat. Both problems are addressed in the next two films at least. I think my favourite throwback of all though is the return of the old Scooby Snacks gag. Since they're no longer made, Velma surprises the lads with a box she'd been saving for years, only for them to have gone stale. There's something a little sad about that actually, the physical representation of how much time has passed. It can also be seen as a bit of a commentary on the franchise. The old formula was stale, and it was time for something new. So, after an extended stay on the island, wherein they experience a few unexplainable phenomena, they peg the gardener as the main suspect. A man who Velma has to balance being attracted to and suspicious of. Try making that spin-off now, bitch! Something else Gunn would lift for the live-action film. Twice. 3 times. In fact, let's just burn through these right now. We've got Velma's suspicious love interest, the gang disbands for a few years, they reunite for an investigation on an island, they are in denial of the real supernatural events, Daphne knows Kung Fu now, Shaggy and Scooby have a hot pepper competition, Voodoo! Villain's plan involves stealing souls to live forever. Oh, I see you over there, Gunn. Show you're working out. All of this builds to the money shot of Zombie Island. Still convinced they're dealing with a man in a mask, Fred approaches a zombie that's appeared and... Status quo destroyed. Now, they had played around with the idea of introducing real monsters into Scooby-Doo a lot before, but this is the first time they had set up what the show had been and how characters from that show would deal with facing the real thing, and they do it in the gnarliest way they were allowed to. I mean, look at this imagery. I love it for a number of reasons. In fact, let me go off-road for a second here. In children's writing theory, there's a strict adherence to the monomyth narrative structure. Stories will be told in 3 distinct phases: departure, initiation, and return. That last stage is seen as particularly important in that medium, representing the regaining of safety and normalcy after enjoying independence and danger. Change is presented as temporary, for now at least, and the adventure as controlled and separate from everyday life. It's all part of building children's confidence without breaking their bubble, so to speak. Wendy will always come back from Neverland. Alice always wakes up, Harry Potter gets on the train, Dorothy's back in Kansas, Alex Rider rejoins Jack, the kids come out of the wardrobe, and so on and so on. For Scooby-Doo, the return was represented in debunking the supernatural. It's a man in the mask, it all makes sense again.
Normal.
So it's not just the fact we have death and monsters that makes this film a more mature, fleshed out YA experience, but the fact that it allows the cast and the viewers to remain in that status quo shift by the end. Maybe even ironically, as you'll see as we progress. Now, alone, this is a concept you can make a film around. It was certainly the main selling point in all of the trailers. The true genius of this first film is that it's not just Scooby-Doo meets real zombies. When we think we figured out the conceit of this film, we're hit with the real twist. Earlier on, we're told the island's tragic history. A pirate gang had landed on the shores of this once peaceful village, looking for a place to store their pirate gold, the red herring of the film. They then, they feed the villagers to alligators.
Holy shit!
In an actual shocking revelation, we see that the hosts of the island, Simone and Lena, were there.
We uttered a curse on the pirates to destroy them as they had destroyed our island. Our wish was granted.
And had prayed to their pagan god for revenge, gaining the power to kill the pirates, but cursed to live forever as cat people.
Over the years, boats continued to come to our island. The plantation flourished.
At least until the harvest moon.
The two reveal they had lured the gang there as they need to feed on souls once every harvest moon. Fun fact, the use of cat people as monsters comes as a reference to SWAT Cats, that old 90s cartoon. This was a rough idea that was originally planned for that show by the writers, and they kept the aspect on. The zombies we saw were never there to harm them, just previous victims trying to help, and rewatching with that knowledge, you can see that clearly. It's also when you get a sense of the sheer number of times these two have performed the ritual, with the time period of the zombies' clothes varying wildly. I mean, real talk, the body count of this film is fucking high. And I appreciate how mature and moral this is for younger audiences. That experiencing trauma doesn't give you permission to turn into a monster yourself. That victims can redirect the pain inflicted on them towards the wrong direction. In fact, it kind of reminds me of how when a show will try and give a villain a developed backstory, only for Twitter to throw hands and harass the writers like they're saying, oh, this bad guy's actually good. I digress. Managing to undo the spell at the last moment, we get treated to a villain death scene that'd make even classic Disney blush.
Oh, why would you do that?
The sun rises and the gang leaves, a little shaken from their adventure, and Daphne a little wiser in a be careful what you wish for kind of way, though still acquiring her hot scoop. The film ends on a nice note. The island is allowed to rest after years of tragedy unsettled it. Overall, Zombie Island is a very impressive project considering the circumstances. As mentioned, it's not perfect. They really could have done something more with the fisherman than what they did, which was nothing, but it's damn impressive. A very solid project. I showed this film to my fiance, who has literally never seen anything Scooby-Doo related before. Not only did she really dig it, she was surprised at how likeable the gang was, kind of convinced via cultural references that they were just boring side characters to the dog. And others agreed. The film did really well, surprisingly well. Not only was this a really good animated film, but it was the first new Scooby-Doo material in 7 years, and people noticed. It helps that the film also received the largest promotional push WB had ever done for an animated film at an estimated 50 million, or 88 million in today's buckaroos. Why they didn't just put it in cinemas, I don't know. You will see that the studio seemed to be in serious denial that people still liked this dumb dog and his group of freaks. Not to spoil the rest of the video, but I do consider Zombie Island to be the best of the trilogy. One of the best films based on an animated kids show ever. It's a great Halloween watch and a cozy night, and it warms my little peanut brain to see something that both holds such clear reverence for the childhood favourite, while also successfully elevating it into something new. I mean, real talk, it's crazy to me that Cyber Chase has gotten a Blu-ray release, but Zombie Island hasn't. It doesn't make sense! Also, the DVD is the only one in the collection I bought with no cover. I mean, what's that about? The fuck is this? Anyway, with Zombie Island a resounding success, a sequel was a no-brainer.